As we all know, Dr. Ratio is finally here, and even better, he is here for everyone for free. Dr. Ratio is a character from the imaginary element who follows the path of the hunt, with a playstyle focus on follow-up attacks. He firmly believes that intellect and creativity are not confined to geniuses and seeks to distribute knowledge to the entire universe to cure the persistent disease named ignorance. It's so funny we have a character that wants to cure ignorance, but is he good? I'm sure most of you are wondering that specific question, since he's being given for free after all. If you haven't already, like this video because it really motivates me a lot. Also guys, I've noticed that 99% of the people who are seeing my videos are not subscribed. So please, it doesn't cost you anything. I'm trying my best to post as regular as possible, and with your support from that side, it will help with my motivation. Before we start, I just want to mention that now I have a members, just a symbolical help if you guys want to help me. You can now join as a member, and if you have suggestions for future plans on members, you can also tell me. I will be glad to add them. Leave your opinion down on the comments because, as you guys can see, this is my first Honkai Star Rail video, so I want to know what you guys think. I recommend you activating the bell for you to be notified when I post any videos here. So let's now talk about Dr. Ratio's kit. Have you ever wished to be more comfortable when pulling into your favorite waifus or husbandos? Thanks to Loot Bar, you now have a better way to top up in Genshin Impact or in Honkai Star Rail that is absolutely safe and provides secure transactions with way more comfortable and affording pricing. They have really fast delivery on your orders, only taking some minutes of waiting, with a trustworthy service with more than 32,000 orders and with the most reviews being 5-star ratings. What makes this service safe to use is that you only need to provide your server region and your UID, so they will never enter your account, and the prices are way cheaper here. The highest top-up costs around 100 euros in game, but on Loot Bar it would cost me around 69 euros, making me save up to around 30 euros. Another great feature that Loot Bar provides is the option to top up multiple times in a row in just one payment. You can purchase the highest top-up 4 times in just one payment, and you will see that you save nearly $100. Topping up on Loot Bar is done throughout MiHoYo's official route, and to prove you all that it's safe, I decided to top up myself using their service. In my case, I bought a Welkin. You just need to select your server and you just write your UID down there. After doing all this, you just need to type in your card, and if you wait some minutes and log into your account, there it is. It's actually surprising how fast it is done. If you guys are used to topping up in Genshin Impact or Honkai Star Rail, be sure to check out lootbar.gg because it's a great way to save your money. I will leave the link to Loot Bar on the description and on the pinned comment for you guys to start saving some money with some discount coupons. Thank you so much Loot Bar for sponsoring this video.
Knowledge, the measure of truth and falsehood.
Dr. Ratio is a 5-star character from the imaginary element who follows the path of the hunt, and it's focused on being a follow-up DPS for your teams based on the number of debuffs the enemy has on them. On his basic attack, Mind is Might, Dr. Ratio will deal imaginary damage equal to 100% of his attack to a single target enemy. This attack is nothing special, and you will mostly use it only when you need to generate a skill point. When you use his skill, Intellectual Midwifery, Dr. Ratio will consume a skill point and will deal imaginary damage equal to 150% of his attack to a single target enemy. His skill is pretty similar with the basic attack, just with better scaling. But with his talent and traces, you will understand why you want to use his skill every time it's his turn on the battle. On his ultimate, Syllogistic Paradox, Dr. Ratio deals imaginary damage equal to 240% of Dr. Ratio's attack to a single target enemy, and will apply Wise Man's Folly. When Dr. Ratio allies attack a target afflicted by the Wise Man's Folly, Dr. Ratio launches follow-up attacks for 1 time against this target. This effect can be triggered up to 2 times and only affects the most recent target of Dr. Ratio's ultimate. This trigger count resets after Dr. Ratio's ultimate is used, and his ultimate cost is 140 energy. One thing I should mention, if you use your ultimate on an almost dying enemy, you will just waste your 2 follow-up attacks. So keep sure you are using the ultimate on an enemy that can actually tank the 2 follow-up attacks if you are dealing with multiple enemies. We already talked about his ultimate, so let's now talk about his talent, Cogito Ergo Sum. When using his skill, Dr. Ratio has a 40% fixed chance of launching a follow-up attack against his target for 1 time, dealing imaginary damage equals to 270% of his attack. For each debuff the target enemy has, the fixed chance of launching a follow-up attack increases by 20%. If the target enemy is defeated before the follow-up attack triggers, the follow-up attack will be directed to a single random enemy instead, so you will never be wasting those follow-ups in case your enemy dies first. Also, it's worth mentioning that to guarantee that your follow-up attack will always land, you would just need to imply a total of 3 debuffs on the enemy. And for last, When you use his technique, Mold of Idolatry, Dr. Ratio creates a special dimension that taunts nearby enemies, lasting for 10 seconds. After entering battle with the enemies in this special dimension, there is a 100% base chance to reduce each single enemy's target speed by 15% for 2 turns. This will help you start the battle with a possible debuff already on the enemies, boosting your chances of doing follow-up attacks. It's also worth knowing that only one dimension created by allies can exist at the same time, so if you pretend on using more characters with dimension techniques like Himeko, Welt or Jingliu, you will need to decide which technique you will want to apply when the battle starts.
Knowledge, the measure of truth and falsehood.
On his minor traces, Dr. Ratio will get a total of 28% attack and 12% crit rate, which will help you even more with your build, and will also get 12.5% defense that will help him with survivability. It's time to his major traces, because this will show you the value of his skill besides just being a trigger to his talent. With his first ascension trace, Summation, when Dr. Ratio uses his skill, for every debuff on the target, his crit rate increases by 2.5% and crit damage by 5%, and this effect can stack up to 6 times. This is an amazing trace that will give you a total of 15% crit rate and 30% crit damage for free. But remember, you will want to apply some debuffs on the enemies first. You can actually just apply one, but the more debuffs you will apply, the less you will need to attack to get this max buff. Talking about debuffs, the second ascension trace, Inference, is here to help you. When you use your Dr. Ratio skill attack on an enemy target, there is a 100% base chance to reduce the target's effect res by 10% for 2 turns. This will give your Dr. Ratio a little bit more help with those debuffs, since he will be able to apply one debuff by himself. And for last, on his third ascension trace, Deduction, when dealing damage to a target that has 3 or more debuffs, for every debuff the target has, the damage dealt by Dr. Ratio to his target increases by 10%, up to a maximum increase of 15%. This trace straight up improves his damage, but it's not for free. You will need to have at least 5 debuffs on the enemy, but he will not be able to apply those 5 debuffs by himself. So, I'm sorry, you will not have these 5 debuffs if you are running him solo, for example. For his trace priorities, focus on your talent first because it will be the main source of damage, then on his ultimate, thirdly his skill, and for last the basics, which you can leave at level 1 because you will most likely never use them.
Knowledge, the measure of truth and falsehood.
Now let's talk about Dr. Ratio Eidolons, because since he is free, it's way more tempting to go after his Eidolons. On his E1, the maximum stackable count for his first ascension trace increases by 4. When the battle begins, he immediately obtains 4 stacks of Summation. This will allow your Dr. Ratio to start the battle with immediately 10 crit rate and 20 crit damage. And instead of capping at 15 crit rate and 30 crit damage, you can now have a total of 25 crit rate and 50 crit damage, just for the trace itself. This Eidolon is amazing for low spenders and will help a lot balancing your stats, and I will not judge people who were saving for him if they decide to go after his Eidolon 1. With his Eidolon 2, when his talent's follow-up attack hits an enemy, for every debuff the target has, deals imaginary additional damage equal to 20% of Dr. Ratio's attack and can be triggered for a maximum of 4 times during each follow-up attack. This Eidolon is a good one for those who are looking to get more damage out of his follow-up attacks. His E3 will increase the level of his ultimate by 2 and the level of his base attack by 1. With his E4, when you trigger his talent, additionally regenerates 15 energy for Dr. Ratio. His E5 will increase the level of his skill and talent by 2, and for last, his E6 will give you an extra follow-up when you use your ultimate, and the damage dealt by the talent's follow-up increases by 15%. With this Eidolon, your Dr. Ratio will be able to do a total of 3 follow-up when your members attack an enemy, after you use your ultimate, and will permanently buff your follow-up attacks.
Knowledge, the measure of truth and falsehood.
It's finally time to talk about the best relics that you will want to use for your Dr. Ratio. Just before we start talking about it, in my opinion, as for now, Dr. Ratio doesn't have a best in slot set, but maybe that will change on the future versions. I had a dream that with the launch of the new planet, we will get a new set that will work perfectly with him. Maybe it will be a debuff related set. Who knows, right? So keep that in mind, and in my opinion, you shouldn't go wasting a lot of your Trailblaze power until the announcement of the new sets, in case they come, because, of course, it was just a dream. If you don't want to wait for future sets, you have some options for now. I firmly believe that 4-piece Wastelander has the potential to be the best relic set we will give him for now. On the 2-piece, you will get 10% imaginary damage, and with the 4-piece, it will give you 10% crit rate if you are attacking debuff enemies, which you will. and will give you 20% crit damage if you are attacking enemies that are imprisoned. Something that will eventually happen if you break their toughness bar with imaginary element, or you can just put a welt and he will trigger that all the time he bursts. Most of you must be thinking, but the Phoenix, the most recent relics added on the game, increase follow-up attack damage. Can I use that on my Doctor ratio? And my answer is, yes, you can, but not the 4-piece. I only recommend using the 2-piece, because the 4-piece will just get you 6% attack every time he does a follow-up. He will be way better with the 2-piece Grand Duke, mixed with a 2-piece imaginary or attack. And another good option is the 4-piece Genius. On the 2-piece it gives you 10% quantum damage, and I know it's useless on Doctor ratio, but on its 4-piece, you will ignore 10% of the enemy's defense. And if the enemy has quantum weaknesses, you will ignore a total of 20% defense. So, even though the 2-piece is pretty much useless, this set is also a good option for most DPSs on the game because of the defense ignore it provides. And if you pair ratio with Silver Wolf, for example, you can always guarantee those 20% defense ignore. To summarize, while you wait for a better set for Doctor ratio that focus more on the debuffs, which, who knows, maybe it comes on next patch, your best pick will be Wastelander or a mix of 2-piece Grand Duke and 2-piece Wastelander, but you can always use 4-piece Genius if you farm that a lot. For planetary ornament sets, his best in slot will be the Inert Salsoto. It provides you an extra 8% crit rate, and if your current crit rate reaches 50% or higher, something that you will most likely be able to get since Doctor ratio gets so many crits for free, your ultimate and follow-ups will do 15% more damage. Another good option is Firmament Frontline Glamour, because it will increase your attack by 12%, and if you manage to reach 135 or 160 speed, you will deal 12 or 18% more damage. And for last, another universal set for most DPSs, we have Space Sealing Station. It will give you 12% attack. If you manage to reach 120 or higher speed, you get an extra 12% attack. In my opinion, Inert Salsoto will be your focus since it helps you and synergizes with everything on his kit.
Knowledge, the measure of truth and falsehood.
Let's now talk about the stats that you will be looking for. For the body, crit should be your focus, and since he gets so many crit rate, you can try to get away with crit damage chest, and you would just try to get crit rate from the Lightcone and or the substats. For the feat, speed or attack percent. Speed will lead to more attacks every cycle, but attack percent will make your attacks hit harder. In my opinion, it's better to attack more times because it means more follow-up attacks. So, I would go for speed. For the spear, imaginary damage, but while you are farming for one, attack percent will do the job. And for the rope, attack percent. For the substats, you should be looking for crits, speed and attack percent. But keep in mind that having some effect hit rate is not actually bad.
Knowledge, the measure of truth and falsehood.
For Doctor ratio Lightcones, his best in slot will be his signature, Baptism of Pure Thought. It increases your crit damage by 20% and will provide an extra 8% crit damage for every debuff the enemy has up to 3 times. And after you use the ultimate, it will deal 36% more damage and your follow-up attack damage will ignore 24% of the enemy's defense. This Lightcone was made to work specifically well with Doctor ratio, but if you don't want to use your wishes on this weapon, don't worry because you have other options. Topa's signature Lightcone, Worrisome Blissful, is another great option for Doctor ratio. It provides 18% crit rate and increases your follow-up damage by 30%. And after you use a follow-up attack, you will apply a debuff on the enemy that for every attack an ally does, it will increase the crit damage dealt by 12%, and stacking up to 2 times. This Lightcone is an interesting choice for him because it will not only help him with crit stats and follow-up damage, but it will also add one extra debuff for Doctor ratio. The best F2P Lightcone for Doctor ratio will be the Cruising Installer C, the one you get for free from the Herta store. This Lightcone will give you 8% crit rate and will give you an extra 8% crit rate when the enemy is below 50%. Besides giving you all of this, every time you kill an enemy, your attack is increased by 20% for 2 turns. Keep in mind you can superimpose this Lightcone for free just by playing the simulated universe every week. This makes this Lightcone super good on Doctor ratio, and if you run this on max superimposition, you can pretty much just focus on crit damage for the chest piece. As the other 5-star Lightcones, like In the Night or Sleep Like the Dead, they can serve as good stat sticks, but they are more focused on increasing basics and skill damage, and ratio will prefer general buffs like attack percent or just straight up follow-up damage bonus. For those who cannot give him any 5-star Lightcones because they have other characters using them, a good option is only Silence Remains, which will give you some attack percent and increase your crit rate if there are 2 or less enemies on the field, making it the best 4-star option in my opinion, especially at S5. And for those people who cannot use any of the previous Lightcones, Swordplay is an amazing pick for him if you manage to maintain a good crit ratio, and this Lightcone becomes even better with the more super impositions you get.
Knowledge, the measure of truth and falsehood.
For Doctor Ratio teams, you will have any character that can add some debuffs on the enemy, like Pella, Welt, Topaz or Silver Wolf. Another good thing that is worth mentioning for those who don't know is that the DOTs are considered debuffs as well, so I can see Gwyneth being a good pair for him as well. If you have the Resolution Shines of Pearl Sweat, it's a good option to include it on the Nihility character that you plan on using him with your team comp, because the Lightcone passive also counts as a debuff. Pair him with Topaz, Rune Mei and a sustain for a good dual DPS team. You can switch Rune Mei for Silver Wolf or Pella if you prefer, or if you feel like you need more debuffs. If you wanna do Doctor Ratio hyper carry, pair him with Tingyun or Bronya, Silver Wolf and a sustain. For a good F2P team, you can pair him with Tingyun, Pella and a sustainer. And for last, for Mono Imaginary team, pair him with Welt or Silver Wolf, Yukong and Luocha. You will have a lot of possible team comps with Doctor Ratio. Just keep in mind to maintain some debuffs on the enemies for him to do his thing, and you will be good to go.
Knowledge, the measure of truth and falsehood.
After this guide, I hope you have a more understanding on how to build and play with the Healer of Ignorance, Doctor Ratio himself. He may be free, but he's actually super good. If you like my video and you like my content, don't forget to like this video. Your support is amazing, and I'm so happy to have you from that side. Please, let's turn that 99 non-subscribers into 0% as soon as possible. All my other sources are on the description. Tell me more about your opinion on Doctor Ratio in the comments. Have you tested him? Do you think he's going to be good or bad? My name is DFenix, and see you all in the next video. See ya!